This is a summary type question. We are given 4 options. We need to find the option that perfectly defines the summary of this given paragraph. Of all the family newspaper appropriate socioeconomic slurs, one that was ubiquitous in 80s and 90s is slowly on its way out to its millennium. Yuppie, we have plenty of equivalents today. Author gives you a lot of examples and then says, their organic buying gym going home owing characters, however, aren't tagged as yuppies as rarely as those from the previous era were. It is not because they aren't from the narcissistic upper middle class. They certainly are, but they look very different now. Now, what author is trying to say here is that 80s and 90s were characterized by a certain narcissistic upper middle class, which is also present today, but it has changed its forms and they don't look the way people used to look in 80s and 90s, and hence we are not able to recognize that as the same phenomena. Let's look at our options. Option A says this millennium is characterized by money obsessed trends of 80s. This is not a trend. This is a class which author has said has existed. Option B says this millennium has a lot in common with money obsessed 80s. This is what is the correct answer is, because he says that what was there in 80s is still also there. So which means we have something which is in common with 1980s. Option C says this millennium saw a comeback of money obsessed 1980s. The millennium did not saw a comeback. We don't know whether the trend had gone away and has come back. We are only saying that it has endured. It was there in 80s, it was there in 19, and it is also there in this millennium. Option D says this millennium is characterized by narcissistic upper middle class. This is incorrect, although it is characterized by a narcissistic upper middle class, but the statement option D does not really talk about 1980s and 80s and 19s, which is a very important part of the paragraph given. Hence, the answer for this question will become option B. This again is a summary type question. It talks about how Silicon Valley, despite a lot of money that they are making, are not showing enough empathy with the poor. It also talks about a professor of psychology who conducted social experiments to exemplify this very fact. Now, Silicon Valley here is used more as an example to illustrate the social experiments that were conducted and how the results of social experiment are exemplified by Silicon Valley has been shown by the passage. Option A says Silicon Valley creates wealth as a staggering clip, but many of its companies and executives' philanthropy has not kept pace. What author has talked about is beyond philanthropy. He is not just talking about the amount of charity that these people do. He is talking about what kind of attitude these people have towards poor. Hence, option A is incorrect. Option B says Silicon Valley exemplifies the assertion that access to money lowers the level of empathy with the poor. A very important point in this paragraph is that Silicon Valley is an example. Silicon Valley has been used to illustrate the main idea being that increase in income can lower the levels of empathy. Now, option B also says the same thing, that Silicon Valley is used as an example to exemplify the assertion which is given in the passage. Hence, option B is correct. Option C says Silicon Valley is an apt example to prove that people who are rich do not empathize much with those that are poor. Author has not said that only money can lead to lower levels of empathy. He's saying that access of money lowers the level. So access to money, if you get more money, that whatever was our level of empathy earlier, it can go down. He's not saying that if anybody who has money has no empathy. He's saying that the greater the amount of money that person will acquire, the lower the level of empathy can happen. Option D says Silicon Valley has seen a steady increase in wealth and a steady decline in philanthropy. Now, author has not talked of a steady incline or steady decline. It has only talked about a relationship between levels of empathy and access to money. Hence, correct answer is option B. This again is a summary type question where we are talking about a certain elections where 86% of people voted, and they voted in order to deny a leader who is an authoritarian leader majority and power. So let's look at our options. Option A says voters in parliamentary elections do not want president to come into power because of his authoritarian nature. This can be correct, but we do not know whether he came into power or not. We only know that the number of voters who casted vote did not give the president majority. But despite lack of majority, the president may or may come into power. Option B says voters in parliamentary election came out in huge numbers to deny president majority. This is correct, as this is exactly what is given in the passage also. Option C says a great turnout of voters in recent parliamentary elections is a reassertion of their democratic status. author has not talked about, the paragraph is not talked about reasserting their democratic status. The paragraph is about that an exponential number of voters came out to cast their votes in order to say something against a leader who is authoritarian in nature. Option D says voters in Turkey do not want an authoritarian president. This may be correct, but this does not talk about the elections, which was a very important part of the paragraph given here. Hence, our correct answer is option B.